The sky had turned a strange shade of gray that morning, and it was not the kind of gray that promised rain. It was heavier, thicker, as if the clouds themselves were thinking, judging. Arya Khan stood at the edge of the forest, notebook in hand, eyes scanning the distant tree line. She had been tracking unusual electromagnetic readings for weeks, signals that didn't match anything humans had ever recorded, and now, she believed she had found their source. The forest itself was alive in ways that felt almost conscious. Trees shifted subtly when no wind blew. The birds were quiet, but their silence was not natural. It was expectant. Arya felt it deep in her chest, a tightness that whispered caution, yet also curiosity. Science had always demanded she look deeper, even when fear told her to step back. A low rumble echoed from within the woods. Arya froze, her pen hovering over the notebook. The rumble grew louder, vibrating through the earth beneath her boots. Then, the ground split open not with the violence of an earthquake, but with deliberate precision. From the fissure rose a figure, tall and impossibly thin. Glowing faintly from within, its eyes were like molten silver. Yet there was no malice in them, only awareness. Arya's first instinct was to run, but her feet were rooted to the ground. Instead, she scribbled furiously in her notebook, trying to capture what she saw. The creature stepped forward, its movement smooth, almost liquid. Where it passed, the plants bent toward it, as if acknowledging its presence. "It's alive," she whispered to herself, though the word felt inadequate. Alive was simple, but this was more than life. It was intelligence. Suddenly, a voice filled her mind, though no sound passed through the air. "Why do you tremble, human?" Arya's pen slipped from her fingers. Her heart pounded as she stared at the being. She wanted to speak, but the words felt small. The voice spoke again, soft, like the rustling of leaves. "I am not your enemy, but your world has called for judgment." The creature's presence radiated something impossible to name: power. Yes, but also sorrow, and a strange, patient hope. It raised an arm, and the fissure in the earth spread, releasing a fine mist that smelled of rain and something older, something ancient and alive. From the mist emerged smaller figures, shapes she could barely define, some humanoid, others shifting forms of shadows and light. They were demons, she realized. But not the kind humans had feared in stories. These were creations of the earth itself, born from its anger and despair, yet also its desire for renewal. Her communicator beeped sharply, breaking the spell. It was a message from the research station. "Dr. Khan, readings have spiked across the continent. We're seeing anomalies in every ecosystem. You need to report immediately." "Dr. Khan, readings in every ecosystem." Arya glanced back at the figures. They were observing her, curious but not hostile. She felt a sudden responsibility settle in her chest. Humanity had called for salvation, but perhaps this was the answer. Not angels, not miracles, but something far more profound. She turned back to her communicator. "Understood," she said, though her voice trembled. "I'll be back soon. Keep monitoring." As she made her way to the vehicle, she noticed the forest shifting subtly behind her. The figures had vanished, or maybe they were blending with the environment. Either way, the world she had known was already changing. The drive back to the station was tense. News channels were filled with reports of strange sightings. Creatures appearing in deserts, oceans, and mountains, each adapting to its surroundings. People panicked, some fleeing cities, others praying, hoping that divine intervention would deliver them from what they now called the demon awakening. At the station, Arya convened a meeting with her team. Dr. Marcus Lee, an engineer specializing in adaptive robotics, was the first to speak. "We've lost satellites over the Amazon. Something is interfering with electronics. It's like the planet itself is alive." "Yes," Arya said, spreading her notebook across the table. "I saw one today. Not a myth, not a hallucination. The Earth is responding to us. These beings are not evil. They are tests, reflections of what we've done, and what we could become." A silence fell over the room. The team absorbed her words, their faces a mix of fear and awe. "How do we respond?" asked Dr. Lena Patel, an ecologist. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "We can't fight them with weapons. Conventional attacks don't work. We've tried. The first drones we sent were simply absorbed or disintegrated by some force we can't measure." Arya nodded. "We need to understand them, study them. If they're part of the planet's will, we have to find a way to communicate. Or at least, coexist." Marcus shook his head. "Communicate? With demons? Are you suggesting diplomacy?" "Not diplomacy in the traditional sense," Arya said. "Understanding. Cooperation. The Earth is speaking through them. We have to listen." The team began to plan expeditions, carefully mapping the appearances of these beings. Every encounter brought new revelations. In one desert region, sand wraiths rose from dunes, absorbing moisture and leaving the land cracked and dry. Yet when approached without hostility, they moved aside, almost acknowledging the human's presence. In the oceans, leviathans glided beneath the waves, their luminous bodies pulsing in rhythm with the tides. Attempts to attack them only resulted in equipment failure. But calm observation revealed patterns, intelligence, and even what seemed like curiosity. Arya often found herself standing on the edge of danger, watching these beings. One night, she climbed a ridge overlooking a valley where shadows moved unnaturally. The creatures emerged from the earth, flowing like smoke, their forms shifting and splitting into countless shapes. She realized they were drawing from human fear, but also from hope and courage. One small act of kindness, a human offering water to a trapped animal, caused a ripple through the forms. Light spread across the shadows, and one of the creatures paused, turning toward her. She felt the mental voice again. "You notice. You act. You are different. CNP. CNP. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Humanity has always feared what it does not understand. But perhaps understanding is the path forward. We are flawed, yet capable of more than we know. The earth may have given us demons, but these are not punishers, they are mirrors. What we see in them reflects what we are, what we could be." As weeks passed, the sightings became more widespread, and panic increased. Governments implemented curfews, military operations, and emergency broadcasts. But Arya and her team focused on observation, recording behaviors, testing responses, and experimenting with non-violent interaction. They discovered that creativity, compassion, and courage seemed to influence the creatures, calming them or even changing their form. One morning, a massive formation appeared over the ruins of a city. Marcus, watching from a drone feed, gasped. The structure was enormous, taller than any skyscraper, composed of shifting rock and molten metal, yet fluid and alive. The team feared it would attack. Arya, however, felt something different. "It's waiting," she said quietly. "It's testing." They broadcast a simple message using lights and frequencies designed to mimic human intention, not aggression. The formation responded, altering its shape, spreading light across the horizon, and then dissolving into a mist that drifted harmlessly into the sky. "It understands," Lena whispered. "Yes," Arya said, eyes fixed on the fading mist. "It sees us, and we have seen it. This is only the beginning." That night, the team gathered around a small fire. The air smelled of rain and soil, and a quiet calm settled over them. For the first time, they felt not fear, but awe. The world had changed, and humans had a choice. React with panic and destruction, or rise to meet the challenge with ingenuity, courage, and respect. Arya looked up at the gray sky. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the earth was alive, watching, waiting, and humanity had finally begun to understand that it could no longer take its place as master of the planet. To survive, to thrive, it would have to earn that right. And so, The first chapter of a new age began, not with divine salvation, but with humans discovering the power within themselves, guided by the unexpected emissaries of their own world. The morning after the first encounter with the city-sized formation, Arya Khan woke with a sense of urgency pressing against her chest. The Earth had spoken through its emissaries, but now the question was whether humanity could respond wisely. Her team had gathered at the research station before dawn, already buzzing with tension. Reports of new sightings were pouring in from every continent. In some regions, people had fled entire towns. In others, communities had begun to adapt, building shelters that respected the creatures' presence rather than trying to fight them. Dr. Marcus Lee was the first to speak, his hands jittering as he adjusted the readings on his console. The anomalies are increasing exponentially. We're seeing new forms every day. Some resemble what we might call animals. Others almost mechanical. But all of them intelligent. They react to humans, but not predictably. Conventional defense systems fail every time. Arya nodded, flipping through her notebook. I know. I've seen enough to understand that trying to dominate them is useless. These beings are the Earth's response to humanity's mistakes. If we approach them with violence, we fail. But if we approach them with understanding— Her voice trailed off. Lena Patel, the ecologist, looked up sharply. Understanding? Arya, some of these formations have destroyed entire villages. People are afraid. Fear is spreading faster than the creatures themselves. I know, Arya said, her gaze firm, and that fear is natural. But we cannot let panic guide us. Humanity has survived disasters before. Not because we were the strongest, but because we adapted, because we learned, because we cared for one another. Outside the station, the wind carried a strange, electric charge. The sky pulsed with light, shadows stretching across the horizon in impossible shapes. Arya and her team moved to the observation deck, binoculars trained on a nearby valley. There, a group of creatures emerged from the earth, shimmering with a translucent glow. Unlike the massive formation over the city, these were smaller, more agile. They seemed to be observing each other, but also the land itself, probing the rivers, the rocks, and the trees. Arya's heart quickened. Watch how they interact with the environment, she said. Notice the patterns. They are testing the land, just as they test us. Marcus frowned. Testing? Or preparing to attack? Lena shook her head. No. Look at the way they move. They avoid harming plants unnecessarily. They only touch what is necessary to adapt. This is intelligence, not instinct. Arya smiled faintly. Exactly. And intelligence can communicate. We just need to find the right language. That language, they discovered, was not words. It was behavior. Acts of care, creativity, and courage seemed to influence the creatures. When villagers in one remote area offered water to a drought-stricken valley, a sand wraith that had been absorbing moisture paused. Its glowing eyes lingered on the humans, and then it dissipated into harmless sand, leaving the valley moist and alive once again. These beings reflect humanity, Arya said later that day. They show what we are capable of, both our failures and our strengths. The news reports grew more chaotic as militaries tried to respond with firepower. Jets fired missiles, artillery rumbled, and yet the creatures remained untouched. Drones were shredded in midair, sensors burned out, and soldiers retreated in confusion. Civilians were terrified, and governments struggled to maintain order. But pockets of resistance began to emerge, not resistance with weapons, but resistance with ingenuity. Communities learned to observe, to respect, to respond with calm rather than fear. Arya and her team became advisors to several of these communities. They taught simple techniques: leave offerings of water or food in neutral areas, avoid sudden movements, and use lights or sounds to signal peaceful intent. Slowly, humans began to see results. Creatures that had once seemed threatening now allowed people to move freely, even revealing patterns in their behavior that hinted at higher intelligence. In one remarkable instance, a coastal village was facing a massive leviathan that glowed beneath the waves, blocking access to fishing grounds. The villagers, guided by Arya's advice, used reflective surfaces and rhythmic movements to mimic the patterns of the tide. The leviathan responded, gradually retreating and then settling into a rhythm alongside the villagers. Fishing resumed, not by force, but by cooperation. Marcus observed the phenomenon on a drone feed. "I can't believe this," he murmured. "We thought we had to destroy them. But they're learning from us. And we're learning from them." "Yes," Arya said. "This is the first time humanity has truly faced something beyond its control and realized that intelligence, empathy, and creativity are more powerful than force." Yet not all humans reacted with wisdom. Militia groups and rogue leaders saw opportunity in the chaos. They tried to harness the creature's power for personal gain, capturing smaller ones, experimenting with their energy, and even attempting to weaponize them. Each time, disaster followed. The creatures responded unpredictably, often targeting the aggressors, reshaping the environment around them. Entire settlements were devastated by unnatural storms or earthquakes, leaving clear evidence that violence and greed were met with consequences. Arya documented each incident meticulously. "The pattern is clear," she said. "These beings are not evil. They reflect intent. When humans act out of selfishness or aggression, they fail. When humans act with care and understanding, they succeed." The team's research began to draw international attention. Leaders from multiple countries reached out, asking for guidance, eager to learn the nonviolent methods that seemed to be working in isolated regions. Arya found herself speaking to audiences via video feeds, teaching the principles of observation, cooperation, and respect. She emphasized the importance of moral courage, doing what is right even when fear is present. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Arya and her team observed a unique phenomenon. Over a canyon in the western mountains, a massive formation emerged, unlike anything recorded before. It shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the sky and the land below. From its form, smaller creatures descended, spreading across the valley. People in nearby settlements had left offerings, planted trees, and tended the rivers. The formation paused, as if acknowledging these acts. Then it dissipated slowly, leaving the land healthier than before. Lena spoke softly, awe in her voice. "Yes," Arya said, "or at least recognizing them. This is the language we've been searching for. Actions, care, creativity. They all speak to these beings. Humanity's true power is in its ability to adapt, to act with wisdom, to learn and grow." The research team began developing a global map, marking regions where cooperation was possible and areas where aggression had caused failure. They called it the Human-Demon Interaction Map, or HDIM. Patterns began to emerge. The creatures' behavior was not random. They seemed to target areas where humanity had failed in stewardship. Overfishing, deforestation, pollution. In contrast, regions where humans acted responsibly saw the creatures as guides rather than threats. Marcus, analyzing the data, shook his head in amazement. "So the Earth is teaching us, not punishing us." "Yes," Arya replied. "It's giving us a choice. Survival is not guaranteed. But growth is possible if we rise to the challenge. And that is the essence of humanity. We are flawed, yes, but capable of brilliance and courage." As weeks turned into months, small communities around the world began to thrive alongside the creatures. Children learned to play near harmless entities, observing and learning from their patterns. Scientists documented interactions. Artists drew inspiration from the forms and movements, and engineers studied the energy flows without attempting to control them. Humanity was discovering a new way of living, not as masters of the planet, but as partners. Still, the challenge remained enormous. Large cities were still struggling with aggressive formations, and not all humans were willing to cooperate. Fear and mistrust were powerful forces, and the temptation to dominate rather than understand was strong. Arya knew that the work ahead would require patience, leadership, and the best qualities of the human spirit. One night, standing on a cliff overlooking a valley filled with shimmering light, Arya felt a connection she could not explain. The wind carried whispers, soft and melodic, and she knew the earth itself was listening. For the first time, she felt that humanity had a real chance, not because of weapons, not because of luck, but because of courage, wisdom, and empathy. "We are not powerless," she whispered to herself. "We can rise to meet this challenge. And if we do, we will not only survive, we will thrive." Her team gathered behind her, watching the creatures glide across the valley. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "I never thought I'd see the day when humans and these beings could coexist." Arya smiled. "Neither did I. But coexistence is only the beginning. We are learning to speak a new language, the language of action, responsibility, and courage. And that is what makes humanity remarkable. That is why we can endure, no matter what the earth sends our way." As the night deepened, the valley glowed with soft light, a reminder that the earth had given humanity a test. It was a test not of strength, but of spirit, and for the first time, Arya felt that humans were ready to meet it. The days were growing longer, yet the tension in the air never seemed to ease. Humanity had begun to adapt, but the challenges were only becoming more intense. Arya Khan stood at the edge of a cliff, overlooking what had once been a bustling city. Now, the skyline was fragmented, twisted into shapes that no human architecture could ever have produced. From the fissures in the ground, enormous creatures emerged, their forms shimmering in silver and gold, each movement precise and deliberate. The creatures were testing humanity on a scale no one had yet faced. Entire districts had been transformed into shifting landscapes, with buildings stretched into impossible angles and roads bending like ribbons. Yet, despite the apparent chaos, there was a strange harmony. Every formation, every creature, seemed to respond to human actions, not out of obedience, but observation. Arya's team had grown accustomed to this pattern. They had developed communication strategies, light signals, movement, and collective gestures that seemed to convey intent without aggression. They were ready for what they had been calling the turning point, the moment when the Earth's emissaries would demand a global response. Reports poured in from around the world. In the deserts, sand wraiths had reshaped vast stretches of land, removing harmful mining equipment and leaving behind fertile soil. In the oceans, leviathans guided fishermen toward safe zones and away from areas overfished or polluted. Forests had shifted to protect endangered species, and even mountain regions had adjusted to prevent avalanches or landslides. But nothing prepared Arya for the formation that appeared above the ruins of New York. The creature was colossal, stretching beyond the horizon, a fusion of metal, stone, and flowing energy. It hovered in silence, radiating power that made aircraft tremble and compasses spin. Governments convened emergency councils. Militaries debated attacking. Yet every strike proved futile. Missiles disintegrated in midair, drones failed, and radar systems went blank. Panic spread like wildfire. Arya watched from the observation deck, her heart pounding. She felt a strange sense of calm amidst the fear. "This is not aggression," she whispered. "It's observation. It's waiting." Her team prepared a plan. They decided to send a message not through force, but through the traits that had worked before: intelligence, creativity, and courage. Using drones equipped with light patterns, sound harmonics, and kinetic movements, they designed a demonstration of human unity. Entire neighborhoods were enlisted to participate. Streets glowed with lamps in coordinated sequences. Music filled the air, and synchronized movements mimicked natural patterns: waves, tides, the flow of wind. The world watched in awe. News reports shifted from fear to fascination as more communities joined in. People realized that their actions, however small, mattered. Every act of cooperation and creativity contributed to the collective message. The colossal formation above New York responded. It shifted, its shape flowing like liquid metal, reflecting the lights and patterns below. Then, it pulsed a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to pass through the earth itself. People on the ground felt a warmth, a gentle pressure that spoke not of threat, but of attention. Arya's voice trembled as she whispered to Marcus, who stood beside her. "It's seeing us. Understanding us. We are speaking in the language it knows." For hours, the demonstration continued. The formation moved in response to the light, the music, and the synchronized human movements. It was not simple mimicry. It was dialogue. Humanity was conversing with a force far beyond comprehension, using courage, wisdom, and creativity as their words. Then, a surprising event occurred. Smaller creatures emerged from the formation, descending into the city. They did not attack. Instead, they observed, interacted, and even helped restore damaged structures. A collapsed bridge was reformed as if guided by invisible hands. Trees that had been scorched by earlier events sprouted new leaves overnight. People gasped at the transformation, realizing that their actions had invited cooperation rather than destruction. Lena Patel turned to Arya, her eyes wide. "This is more than survival. It's partnership. We've never faced anything like this." "Yes," Arya replied. "The Earth is teaching us, but it's more than teaching, it's giving us a choice. We can continue on a path of fear and destruction, or we can rise to meet the challenge with our best qualities: courage, creativity, empathy. That is how we survive. That is how we thrive." The demonstration reached a crescendo as communities worldwide joined in. In deserts, towns mimicked the rhythm of the dunes. In forests, humans moved in harmony with the wildlife. At sea, fishermen and researchers coordinated movements with the leviathans. Every act, every pattern, every moment of cooperation amplified the message. The colossal formation responded by reshaping its structure. For the first time, it formed a humanoid shape, towering above the ruins, its glowing eyes fixed on the humans below. The voice spoke, not through sound, but directly into the minds of those watching. "We have observed. We have seen your fear, your hope, your courage. You are capable of more than destruction. You have begun to understand." A hush fell over the city. People on the streets, in their homes, even those watching from distant continents, felt the weight of the words. It was not a command, nor a threat, but a recognition, a mirror reflecting humanity's potential. Arya stepped forward, addressing her team. "This is the moment we've been waiting for. Humanity is being tested, not punished. The Earth seeks partnership, not domination. And we are proving worthy." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "I can't believe it. After all the fear, all the chaos, we're being trusted." "Yes," Arya said softly. "And trust must be honored. That is what separates humans from mere survivors. We have a choice. And this is our chance to rise." As the weeks passed, the interactions became more sophisticated. Humans learned to anticipate the creature's needs, to act before disaster struck, and to use creativity as a tool for dialogue. Entire cities developed coordinated systems to communicate intent, blending art, science, and empathy into a new form of global cooperation. Yet not all humans responded with wisdom. In some regions, greed and fear led to conflict. Rogue groups tried to exploit the creature's abilities for power, capturing smaller beings or forcing interaction through violence. Each time, the consequences were immediate and devastating. Storms, earthquakes, and strange environmental shifts reminded humanity that the Earth's emissaries were not tools, but judges reflecting intent and holding humans accountable. Arya's team continued to document and analyze these incidents. "The lesson is clear," she said one evening. "Force fails. Fear fails. But courage, creativity, empathy. They work. Humanity's true strength is not in weapons or control, but in understanding and moral courage. That is why we can rise. One night, standing atop the tallest surviving building in the city, Arya watched as the colossal formation above New York slowly dissipated. Smaller creatures remained, observing the humans below, their glowing forms blending with the city lights. The message was clear. Humanity had passed the first stage of the test. Cooperation, creativity, and courage had earned recognition. Lena joined her, pointing to the horizon. Look at them. They're not leaving. They're guiding, helping us rebuild. Yes, Arya said, her heart swelling with hope. We have learned that we are not alone. These beings are not enemies. They are partners, mirrors of what we can be if we rise to the challenge. The following days were filled with quiet transformation. Communities repaired infrastructure, restored damaged ecosystems, and implemented sustainable practices. Children learned to observe and respect the creatures, understanding that every action had consequences. Scientists, engineers, and artists worked together. Guided by a new philosophy, humanity must act with wisdom, courage, and empathy to thrive in this new world. Arya reflected on the journey so far. Humans had cried out for salvation, expecting divine intervention, but the answer had been within themselves all along. The earth had sent its emissaries not as punishers, but as catalysts, pushing humanity to discover its own potential. Fear had been replaced by understanding, panic by creativity, and despair by courage. The transformation was far from complete. Large cities still faced challenges, rogue groups still tested boundaries, and the creatures' ultimate intentions remained mysterious. Yet humanity had begun to rise not as conquerors, but as partners of the earth. They were learning a new language, one not of words, but of action, understanding, and moral courage. Arya knew that this was only the beginning. The true test would come as humans faced greater challenges, as the creatures continued to observe, and as the planet itself demanded stewardship rather than exploitation. But for the first time, she felt a profound confidence. Humanity could meet the challenge. Humanity could rise. And humanity could thrive. As the night fell, the city glowed softly under the presence of the creatures, a harmonious dance of light and movement. The earth had granted its emissaries, and humans had begun to understand that survival and greatness were possible through courage, creativity, and empathy. The first stage of humanity's transformation was complete, and the promise of a new era shimmered across the horizon, bright with possibility. The dawn broke over a transformed world. Cities that had once been gray and lifeless now pulsed with color and movement. Humans and the emissaries of the earth had begun to coexist, and the lessons of courage, creativity, and empathy were woven into daily life. Arya Khan walked through the streets of a city that had been partially rebuilt, watching children play among gentle creatures that shimmered with soft, iridescent light. The air smelled of rain and soil, a quiet reminder that the planet itself was alive and watching. Arya's team had spread across continents, advising communities, documenting interactions, and teaching the principles that had allowed humanity to survive the first stages of the transformation. Every place they visited offered new lessons. In coastal towns, humans coordinated with leviathans to maintain the balance of marine life. In forests, small, shadow-like creatures guided workers planting trees and caring for wildlife. Even deserts had been reshaped, with sand wraiths protecting water sources and guiding people to fertile lands. For the first time, Arya saw humanity acting not as conquerors of the earth, but as stewards. Every action mattered. The creatures, which humans had once feared, were now teachers, mirrors reflecting the planet's needs and humanity's potential. Their presence was no longer threatening, it was nurturing. One morning, Arya and Marcus traveled to a city in the western mountains. Large portions had been destroyed during the initial chaos, but now, massive crystalline structures rose from the earth, integrated seamlessly with human buildings. The formations were alive, shimmering with energy, and small creatures moved along the streets, guiding construction teams, clearing debris, and even helping children navigate safely. Marcus turned to Arya, eyes wide. I never thought I'd see anything like this. The Earth and humans working together. Yes, Arya said, smiling. We have learned that survival is not about strength or weapons. It's about understanding, cooperation, and courage. That is humanity's greatest power. The team was soon called to a meeting with global leaders and representatives from communities worldwide. Satellite feeds displayed interactions on every continent. Patterns emerged. Places where humans had embraced empathy and responsibility flourished, while regions still dominated by fear and greed struggled. The message was clear. The Earth's emissaries rewarded moral courage and collective action. Arya spoke to the gathering. Humanity has cried out for salvation for centuries. We expected miracles to come from above, from some divine hand. But the answer has been within us all along. The Earth has given us its emissaries, not to punish us, but to teach us. Our survival, our growth, depends on our ability to act wisely, creatively, and courageously. Leaders listened, some with skepticism, others with awe. The experiences of the past months had been undeniable. Weapons had failed. Fear had failed. Only understanding and moral courage had succeeded. Communities that had embraced these principles had not only survived but thrived. Across the globe, humans continued to build partnerships with the creatures. Cities once in ruins became thriving hubs of creativity and learning. People developed sustainable systems for energy, food, and water. Education changed. Children learned to understand the planet and its emissaries, practicing empathy, creativity, and courage from an early age. In a remote desert, a group of villagers watched as a sand wraith glided along the dunes, revealing hidden water sources and guiding their crops to fertile land. In a coastal village, fishermen coordinated with glowing leviathans, ensuring the balance of marine life while maintaining their livelihoods. In the mountains, children followed shadow-like creatures along safe paths, learning respect for the land and the delicate ecosystems it contained. Arya marveled at these stories. Humanity had grown, not because of dominance, but because of understanding. They had learned to act in harmony with forces far beyond their comprehension. The creatures were no longer threats. They were guides, shaping the planet and humanity alike. Yet Arya knew the journey was not complete. Some regions still resisted cooperation. Fear and greed had not vanished entirely. Small factions continued to attempt to exploit the creatures for power. But every failure served as a lesson, demonstrating that actions rooted in wisdom and empathy would always succeed where force and selfishness failed. One evening, Arya returned to the city where the colossal formation had first appeared over New York. Though the formation no longer hovered in its immense form, remnants of its energy flowed through the city. Light shimmered along streets, guiding pedestrians and vehicles safely. Small creatures moved alongside humans, helping them navigate safely, offering guidance, and even assisting in construction. Arya stood in the central square, watching a child laugh as a gentle creature wrapped a shimmering tendril around a small tree, helping it grow straight and strong. The child reached out, and the creature paused, as if acknowledging the human touch. This is what we were meant to become, Arya said softly to herself. Not rulers of the earth, but partners, guardians, capable of great courage and wisdom. Her thoughts were interrupted by a voice in her communicator. Lena's voice was filled with excitement. Arya, you need to see this. There's a gathering of creatures in the valley outside the city. They're forming patterns. Like a message. Arya hurried to the edge of the city and looked down at the valley. Thousands of creatures of all shapes and sizes moved in harmony, creating patterns of light and motion. Humans joined in, coordinating their actions with the creatures, blending creativity and intelligence to form a global message. The patterns shimmered, shifted, and coalesced into forms that seemed to express gratitude, recognition, and hope. Marcus whispered beside her, awe in his voice. They're communicating with us. Yes, Arya said. They're showing us that partnership is possible, that humanity can rise above fear, above greed, and embrace its true potential. This is the beginning of a new era. As the sun set, the valley glowed with a radiant light. The creatures paused, their forms reflecting the unity and courage of humans below. The planet had granted its emissaries, and humans had responded with wisdom, empathy, and creativity. A harmony had been achieved, not by force, but by the best qualities of the human spirit. Arya felt a deep sense of peace. She had feared that humanity might fail, that the emissaries would see only destruction and fear. But humans had risen to the challenge. They had embraced moral courage, worked together, and learned to act with wisdom. The Earth's test had been harsh, but it had shown humanity its true potential. The following months were marked by reconstruction and learning. Communities that had struggled began to adopt the principles of cooperation and empathy. Governments revised policies to prioritize sustainability and stewardship. Scientists continued to study the emissaries, not to control them, but to understand and learn from them. Artists, writers, and educators drew inspiration from the creatures' patterns, integrating these lessons into culture and daily life. Humanity had become stronger not through domination, but through unity. The creatures, once feared as demons, were now celebrated as teachers, guides, and partners. The Earth, through its emissaries, had challenged humans to rise to their potential. And rise they had. Arya often reflected on the journey. Humanity had cried out for salvation, expecting miracles from above. But the true miracle had been within themselves. The emissaries had shown what was possible, and humans had met the challenge with courage, creativity, and empathy. They had survived, yes, but more importantly, they had grown. In the final days of her work in the city, Arya stood in the central square, watching children play alongside the creatures. Laughter filled the air, blending with the soft glow of the emissaries. The buildings, once scarred by chaos, now reflected the harmony between humans and the Earth. Every action, every choice, every act of courage had contributed to this new world. She turned to Marcus, who smiled at her. "We did it," he said. "Humanity actually did it." "Yes," Arya replied, "but this is only the beginning. The Earth will always test us. There will always be challenges. But now we know what we are capable of. We have learned to act with wisdom, courage, and empathy, and that is what will carry us forward." As night fell, the city shimmered with light, a testament to human resilience and moral growth. The emissaries moved through the streets, guiding, teaching, and protecting. The Earth had given its greatest gift, not through fire or wrath, but through beings that reflected humanity's potential. And humans had risen to meet it. The future was no longer uncertain. It was filled with promise, shaped by the choices of those willing to act with courage and wisdom. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge, and in doing so, had discovered the strength within itself. The Earth, its emissaries, and humans had forged a partnership that would endure. A new era, in which intelligence, empathy, and moral courage defined the path forward. And in the quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the city streets, and the gentle glow of the creatures lit the night, Arya knew the truth. Humanity had become the stewards of their world, capable of greatness beyond what they had ever imagined. They had risen, not because they were the strongest, but because they had chosen to act with their best qualities. The dawn of a new era had come, and it was bright with the light of courage, wisdom, and hope.